Hello, today we are going to learn about how to use SQL Server, Scalar, Valued Functions, SVF, to transform sex ID column into gender name. Objectives. What is SVF? Number 2, create gender table and insert data. Number 3, SVS scripts. Number 4, testing SVF. Number 5, non-transformed sex ID column. Number 6 is a transform sex ID into gender name. And then the best practices. What is SVF? In a SQL Server, scalar valued functions, SVFs, are user-defined functions that return a single value. They can be used within queries or other SQL statements to perform calculations or transform data. 2, you need to create a gender table and insert data. Here's a sample of a gender table I created, and I inserted the gender ID 1 through 4. Next, you need to create the scripts. SVF scripts. Create a function starting with the schema DBO, the user-defined function gender by gender ID. If you give me gender ID, I will give the gender name. That's what I mean by gender by gender ID. Next, you add the parameters for the function here. My parameter is the @ gender ID and its integer data type. We return the FACA 20 data type. As begin, you have to declare the return variable here. My variable declared as the @ gender, and it is a varchar 20. Next, you need to add the tsql statement to compute the return value here. In my case, I say select the variable equals selects gender from DBO gender, where gender ID is the variable that I supplied. Next, return the value of the function. I say return the variable gender. That's the end of the script. Here's my testing. Before you move forward after the function, it's always a good practice to test to make sure it works properly. So I will use select dbo.udf_gender by gender ID. I select 4 here as my variable as gender. And when I clicked on it, it returned the gender trans female to male, and that is the equivalent of ID number 4. Non-transformed sex column. Here is the client table that is not yet transformed. If you notice, the sex ID only have the numerics: 1 for male, 2 for female, 3 for male to female transgender, 4, and so on. This is a transformed sex ID table into gender name. I have to apply, first of all, drop font is a database name because it could be used across database platform. So in this case, identify my database, identify the schema, and then I pick the name UDF, gender by gender ID. I put the sex ID as gender. If you notice, when I run the select statement, I put the entire script here. So when you run the select statement, it would change the sex ID into gender name, female, male, trans male, female, and so on. Best practices. Avoid using scalar value functions in a select clause without specifying the schema. Limit the use of scalar valued functions in the where clauses or the join conditions. Use scalar valued function for simple calculations or reusable expressions to keep the code organized and maintainable. Scalar valued functions in SQL Server are helpful for encapsulating logic and calculations into a reusable units, making your code more organized and easier to maintain. However, be cautious with their usage to ensure optimal query performance. All right, now the first thing I'm going to do now is to go ahead and show you how I created a gender table. I will go into my SQL Server and I will go to my database that I have a database here called drug fonts. Go to drug fonts and we'll find gender. Let me show you how it looks like. If you go to select, here is my gender table and here are the data I inserted, gender ID 1 through 4. All right, slide number 5. I'll show you how I created the scripts. The scripts, you can actually copy this. You can copy this and paste so you can see how I created my script. You go back to your database and you look for where you want to create the scripts. For programmability, you see where it says functions. You right click functions and you look for new. You look for scalar valued functions. If you click that, you see the blank one that opens up. You can just overwrite that if you use what I have, and then you need to specify the database that you want to use. Database here that have my table is called doc doc fonts ds. So we'll say go. Use the word use a drop font. All right, and I took it. If you notice what I'm going to do here, create the function dbf, and then I would add the variable gender ID is integer, returned varchar 20 as begin, declare the return variable here, and then you can also hey Dr. A, we only do lectures 1 tonight, right? Okay, now you can continue to say return variables as begins, declare return variable here, declare gender variable varchar 20. I will add the statements select gender from. Now let's go ahead and run that and see what happens. Okay, you execute that successfully. Now we are going to test it to make sure it's working. So test it, just copy this, go down and test it. Remember, you can put any number here which was equivalent. 2 represented the female. So I'm just going to say select. Select that. I'm going to run it and see how it looks like. Alright, it does work. It shows female. If you do want to see the column name, you can just say as gender. If you tap uppercase, it will also have uppercase. So try it again. Now the top change to gender. That's how you query and test your function to make sure it's functioning properly. Alright, the next thing we are going to do, slide number 7. We are going to check out our non-transform sex ID column. So you go back to your SQL server and you scroll down to the client's table. If you check it out, here's a client table. The sex ID is all numeric. And now we are going to transform this into gender name using their scalar function. All right, so we're gonna go back to the one that is being transformed, and here is the code. To save you the headache, you can copy mine. Copy mine and put right there. Where if you find sex, put it there. Control V. All right, and the sex is being replaced. So you remove that one. Remove one dot. All right, it looks so good. All right, we're gonna run it again. If you notice, the transformation has taken place. If you notice, the gender now has a gender name and the sex ID has been removed because we used the word as gender. Basically, that is the end. That's how you transform your data using scalar functions. All right. Thank you for coming, and that's the end. And now we come to the best practices. Good night, and we'll talk about the next one later.